everyone, and welcome to another episode of Night Caller's Bigfoot Radio. My name is Laurie Hood, and I'm here tonight with hosts Ricky and Lauren Smith. And Jeff is on his way, so he'll be here shortly. Lauren, how are you doing tonight? And Rick? I don't know if I have Rick off mute or not, but how are you doing tonight, Lauren?
Lauren is still with the kids.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Well, I guess I'm by myself. Anyway, thank you all for coming tonight and listening. We've got Scott Carpenter back. Yes. Hello. I'm not by myself. Yeah, how's it going? Hey, is she with the baby right now?
Yep, she's with Z.
Okay.
And I've got a cold, so bear with me.
Okay, that's fine. How you doing? Well, I guess you just told us.
Not too bad.
Okay. Well, I know that they're training their youngest one to sleep through the night, so he was very vocal earlier. He was letting us know that he's not ready to do that. And so, yeah, and you got to do it every single night, whether it's a show night or not, right?
Yep. That's why I'm not on most of the time. I have to deal with them first thing at the beginning of the radio show.
Well, we appreciate that, because if you weren't, then she would, and then where would we be, you know? So I want to thank you for doing that, and I guess it's her turn, and we have Rick. So, Rick, it's good to have you on. You got anything to share tonight before we bring on Scott?
Not really. I enjoyed last week's show, and I can't wait to hear some more. Last week I didn't really have a lot to say because it was just nice to listen up and hear everything he had to say.
Okay, well, it's going to be a good show. Let me go ahead and go over the intro real quick, and we'll go ahead and bring Scott on. Scott Carpenter has been researching the Bigfoot phenomenon and other cryptids since 2009. Scott is the author of 4 books and 3 active blogs on the subject, to include the Bigfoot Field Journal, Volumes 1 and 2, the Dogman, Monsters Are Real, and his latest release, the Nephilim Among Us. A member of North American Bigfoot Search, Scott participated in the groundbreaking Sasquatch Genome Study, contributing multiple hair and saliva samples, 11 of which were used in the study. Now, we did talk about this last week, so anyone that did not get to hear part 1, it's in the archives, or also can be found on our YouTube channel. Scott's research has also been featured on the television show Finding Bigfoot, and more recently, Scott's work was featured on an award-winning series by Les Stroud, Survivor Man Bigfoot. Scott holds a BS in computer science and is the operations manager for a software development firm. He currently resides in East Tennessee, is married, has 6 children and 2 grandchildren. So if anybody wants to call and talk to Scott tonight, the number is 347-989-0313. And Ricky, just jump in anytime you want to, okay? And we'll bring Scott on. How are you doing tonight, Scott?
I'm doing good. How are you? How's everybody?
We're doing good. We're trying to survive this nasty weather. I mean, we had first alert weather day yesterday, and we had tornado warnings and, 3 or 4 in our area, but we managed to not get anything but a whole lot of rain. So we were very blessed. So how's everything been going with you? Pretty good?
Everything's been going good. We had a really pretty weekend, so got to spend a little bit of time outdoors and just enjoying the weather. And real nice spring day.
Yes, it is. Yes, it has been. Last week we really enjoyed having you on. Last week we talked about the Sasquatch Genome Study, and also about the Dogman. You gave a terrific encounter. I'm really surprised and amazed that I did not get nightmares from that, because the Dogman, werewolves, all of that just gives me the heebie-jeebies. So, but tonight we're going to be talking about your new blog, the Nephilim Among Us. So, can we go ahead and dive into that? Because
sure.
Can you explain to people what a Nephilim is first, and then
Sure.
go from there?
Yeah, and I've written, I've got the blog, and I've also written an ebook, and hopefully soon I'll be coming out with a paperback. I'm trying to get everything buttoned up on the book, but I do have an ebook, and the link is on the blog. There's my shameless plug. But what the Nephilim are in Genesis 6:2-4, and basically I'll read it from the Bible. The Bible says the sons of God, and those are the angels. That's the way I interpret that through study. The fallen angels saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives, all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days. Now, when the Bible uses the word giants, that word is translated Nephilim. And Nephilim means to fall, or the fallen ones. So there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and bare children to them, the same became the mighty men which are of old, men of renown. So it is my theory that the sons of God, which in the Bible, anytime you see the word sons of God, Benai Elohim, it's referring to angels. And the angels and the fallen angels that were cast down, so came into women and actually procreated with them. They changed their molecular structure so they could procreate with human women, and their offspring were what we would call, or the Greek would call, the Titans. That's where all these myths and all this legend comes from. So you have these enormous giants, and that was your first generation. So that's where the word Nephilim arises and where it comes from. And if you notice, it's, I kind of draw, in the book, I kind of draw the parallel because, the Sasquatch Genome Study said that you had basically a Bigfoot is a human hybrid and has an unknown male progenitor and a female and a human female progenitor. So it kind of falls in line with what the Nephilim, what the Bible says they are, which again, fallen angel DNA would be definitely unknown, DNA.
Well, I've had numerous guests on that have mentioned that they believe. Well, I'm not going to say numerous. That's a little bit too many. Maybe one or two that believe in the Nephilim theory, and it's not a common theory at all. Do you find that you find a lot of people that don't agree with you on?
It just depends on people's worldview. Now, I'm a Christian, and I believe the Bible is the inerrant, inspired Word of God. So, it influences my worldview. But I find both there are Christians and non-Christians that disagree with me. Now, you have some. You got several camps out here. You've got the bipedal ape, smart ape camp. Okay, and that's a lot of your mainstream. That's your Cliff Barrickman. That's your Finding Bigfoot folks. That's your Jeff Meldrums, Dr. Bendernagel. They're the smart apes. And then you have another camp that, goes a little farther and says, no, we believe they're human hybrids. We agree. We looked at the Sasquatch Genome Study, and so they're a human hybrid, but they're just a missing link. They're not. There's nothing supernatural about them. And then you have the camp that I'm in or leaning towards, which says that they're, after 8 years of doing this now, I believe they're the Nephilim. They're the offspring or the descendants of the offspring of fallen angels and human women. And then there's also what you call the woo camp that goes even a little bit further. So but to be honest with you, I guess you could say I'm in the woo camp because if you believe the Bible is the true Word of God and it's accurate, then there's a lot of woo in the Bible. Okay.
Yeah.
There's talking donkeys. There's walking on water. There's raising people from the dead. There's casting demons out in swine. I could go on and on about the miracles in the Bible. So.
Well, it's because the Lord is supernatural.
That's right. So if so if you want to, a lot of people say I don't believe in that woo stuff, and I'll ask them, "Are you a Christian?" And they'll say, "Yes, I'm a Christian." And I said, "Well, then you believe in a lot of woo stuff." And they're like, some people just don't. A lot of people will segregate that part of their lives. They'll say, "Okay, put a
right.
inseparable wall. There's the Bible, and then there's real life." And a lot of people don't realize. I hate to say this, but the God that you worship is the woo. He's supernatural. So if you're going to, there's going to be dealings with him, they're going to be supernatural. So a lot of people, I think it's the more modern, probably the last couple hundred years that people have got into this mindset that there's some sort of division between the supernatural and the natural. So, like I said, that's a person's worldview, and I'm open to all views. Like we were talking earlier, I'm not one of these that says, "Oh, I'm going to defriend you, and I'm not going to talk to you if you think it's just a smart ape." I mean, I have my research. I present my case, and I present it to you, and we can talk about it. You can disagree with it. That's fine, and vice versa. But I think everybody moves forward by putting all these ideals out here and taking everybody, getting together, belief, some respect, because there's a little crossover in all this, and I think everybody has to admit that. You know what I'm saying? There's just, and there's going to be, there's common ground here. And, it's kind of like the UFO people and the Bigfoot people. There's still a big rift right there, but there's some common ground. And I think, slowly but surely, there's a little bit of respect. The UFO people and snobs and this whole cryptid and, if you want to call it conspiracy deal, because, they think, we were here first. We have doctors and scientists, and we have, all our methods, and you people are just Bigfoot weirdos out there, But I think, I think it's, as time's gone on, I not there where it ought to be, but I think, MoveOn actually had David Paulides, speak at a convention and talk about Bigfoot. So, that's a big step for the MoveOn the UFO folks, because that, a few years ago they wouldn't have anything to do with anybody in Bigfoot research.
Well, I have a question for you. If this theory was to play out, weren't all the Nephilim destroyed in the Great Flood? Well,
that's a good question. If you read in Genesis 6:2-4, it says, and it was talking about there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. And then also we see the Nephilim tribes come back when the children of Israel went in to possess the Promised Land, and they sent the spies into the Promised Land. If you'll remember, the report was, there's 12 spies. 10 gave a bad report. 2 gave a good report. And if you'll remember, these some of these tribes were giants, and the Bible says that we were as grasshoppers in their sight, and so were we. So basically, the Bible says that some of these tribes the giants were 30 and 40 feet tall.
My
so,
Lord.
And then you have, and some of these names for the tribes, some of these tribe names, the Nephilim, I'm trying to get this section in my book. I've got all the tribes listed. Hang on one second, and I'll go through those guys, because there's just a whole bunch of different tribes that were in the Promised Land, and they were all what I consider to be Nephilim tribes based on those Ham. There's several theories on how the Nephilim got through the flood. There's one theory that says that Noah's sons, their wives, could have been Nephilim, and that's genetically possible. Other people think that angels cohabitated and or started genetically manipulating the genome again, and that's where that came from. So I'm trying to find it, and I can't find it. But there was all kind of. I wish I could find it because I could name you off all the different tribes that were in the area. Just a second.
Yeah, see if you can find that. I know that you're searching for this. Have you ever heard of the movie Is Genesis History?
No, I haven't.
Actually, a documentary. It's a very interesting documentary. It is put out by, it's an investigator, and he basically approaches several different scientists on several different levels of our history. And one thing that they all agree on is that our geography and our geology shows that we did have a great flood. The great flood actually covered the entire earth. And over the entire earth, at the same level of and I'm not a geologist by any means, but the same stratus of the soil over the entire earth shows that there was a great flood at the same level all over. And what they're finding was it was really mind-blowing for me, because I've always had a scientific mind, and I grew up in science class thinking that the world was 4 billion years old or so, 10 billion or however old it is, and that the dinosaurs lived 14 million years ago or whatever, and all this. But what they are saying in this documentary is that, and I left there having a headache. Because I just could not wrap my mind around it. But it said basically they proved, in their way, that the earth was only 6,000 years old. And that everything in the Bible was correct in saying that God created the heavens and earth about 6,000 years ago, and that dinosaurs roamed the earth at the same time that Adam and Eve were on the earth.
That's right.
So, I can't help but wonder if maybe the dinosaurs were the giants they were talking about. But anyway, it's an extremely interesting documentary, and a lot of people won't buy it at all. But when you watch it, it's very compelling. But it's really, really hard for me to go against everything I've ever been taught. And they were talking about carbon dating being incorrect, that you can get 3 different scientists carbon dating a certain sample, and they'll all come up with different ages, and they're thousands of years off. So basically, is it really that old?
Yeah.
I mean, how can they tell? I mean, but anyway, did you ever find it?
Yeah, I found it. There's a couple places in the after the flood. There were basically when there's one passage in 2 Samuel 21:18 where it said it came to pass that after this that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Cobb, and of course the Philistines were one of the which I believe was one of the Nephilim tribes. They were giants. And then
and Goliath was a Philistine.
That's right. Goliath was a Philistine, and it says, and I can't pronounce these names, Sekabah, whose Shattat slew Saph, which was the sons of the giant. And there was, again, a battle in Gob with the Philistines and Helahan and his sons, and they slew the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, the staff whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And it talks about that they had 6 fingers and 6 toes.
And this is well after the flood. This was after the flood, actually.
This is way after the flood.
Mhm.
And then we also have and one thing I kind of wanted to back up to. Everybody says, well, why would Satan and the fallen angels start breeding with women? What was the end game there? Why have human hybrids? Well, if you go back to Genesis 3, after 3:15, after Satan had tempted Eve and she took the apple, that's where a lot of L.A. Marzulli and some other people, it's a seed war. That's where the war began between God and Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And basically God kind of God declared, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed, and that's genetic, your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. In other words, he's already declared, I'm sending my seed, and he's going to kill you, basically, bruise the head, and you will bruise his heel. So now you're Satan, and you've got this issue here. Okay, through the seed of the woman, human beings, God's going to send, it's going to incarnate, and he's basically going to finish me off. So one way to prevent that is to corrupt the genome, because if there are no human beings left on Earth, then obviously God can't incarnate himself through the seed of the woman. So that's just my opinion, and I mean others hold that, but that's the reason, or one of the reasons why this corrupting of the seed began. And even later in Genesis 6:11, when God decides to send the flood, he says the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. It says, for all flesh. It didn't say some flesh. It didn't say half the flesh. It said all flesh. They corrupted his way upon the earth. And that corrupted his way is a term referring to the genetics. In other words, not only had the fallen angels messed with human DNA, but they had started screwing around with the animal DNA as well. And you've got the minotaurs, you've got the sadars, you hear these creatures half lion, half human, all this craziness going on, and so it was really before the flood. You can imagine what it got down to. A lot of people even think some of the dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurus Rex and Velociraptor. You notice how they're meat eaters and they're very very fearsome looking creatures. So you have to wonder, were they genetically engineered? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but that's kind of where where I get all this and where some of this comes from in my theory. Of course, I get in so much more detail in the book. But the tribes, when basically all the Nephilim tribes came from Ham, and he settled the land of Canaan, and all those in the land of Canaan were known as Canaanites. But some of the tribes were the Hittites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the Philistines. And if you start looking up all these names have meanings. Like some of these names mean the long neck. Some of these mean the bloodsuckers or the vampires. Some of these are the giants. Some of these are the giants. Some of these are the lizard-like people. So, it's apparent that that the devil had about 400 years after Israel's exile to kind of plant minefields in the Promised Land. So when the children of Israel went back in there, they had to deal with all these. And if you'll remember, there's a passage in the Bible where when God tells them to go in here, He gives them all those tribes, those Nephilim or tribes, and He tells everybody, He tells to kill all of them, kill the women, the children, and their animals. Don't take anything, don't take any spoils. And then other tribes, He says, no, it's okay with this tribe that you can spare the women and children, you can take spoils. But there's certain tribes that He just flat out told them, you kill all of them. And a lot of people, this is where a lot of people say, well, see, God's some sort of some sort of maniac. He's wanting to commit genocide. But what people don't realize is, and this is the sad fact about it, if I'm right and there are human-angel hybrids, they will be honest, they were never meant to exist, okay? Only God creates life and breathes a living soul. So when an angel creates something, it doesn't have a God-created soul. And it's a pitiful state of existence, but that's the way it is. They were never supposed to exist. Okay. And so, that's why, it was commanded that, God, commanded them to destroy all of it. So it's in Deuteronomy, I can't even say the name, Deuteronomy, 28:10 through 18. I don't want to get, in a Bible lesson, but this is where God tells them, both the cities of these people, which the Lord thy God to give thee an inheritance, thou shalt save alive, that nothing that breatheth, but thou shalt utterly destroy them, namely the Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, as the Lord hath commanded thee, that they teach you not to do after their abominations, which they have done unto their gods, little g, so that ye sin against the Lord, you do not sin against the Lord your God. So there was He wanted them to kill these certain tribes. While other tribes, He said, you could smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword, but the women and the little ones and the cattle and all that is in the city, even all the spoil thereof shalt thou take unto thyself. So some places He said it's okay to take the spoils of war, and in other places He said kill everything. And I think it's
wasn't there one point where they refused to kill the women and children? I seem to remember that story.
Yeah, that disobedience is what got them the Golden Heights and the war that they're in right now, probably.
Yeah.
So, but it's my opinion that that's why He wanted, them to wipe them out. Now, to kind of dovetail into my theory, I'm kind of jumping around, but the reason that you even have Nephilim spread throughout the world is these Nephilim are not stupid. Okay, they're very intelligent, and there's evidence that they were extremely good, skilled engineers, mathematicians. They had a lot of knowledge from the fallen angels, so they knew quite a bit more than they should have known. They if you're a 30-foot giant and a 6-foot man is killing you and slaughtering your whole village, you kind of figure it out. I think God's behind this. I'm going to get out of here. So I think there was a diaspora when the Israelites went into the Promised Land, and some they didn't fight and they spread. They spread throughout Northern Europe. They came to North and South America. They kind of spread. And if you look back, especially at the history of South America, when that race of people with the elongated skulls showed up, they showed up about the same time that Israel went into the Promised Land. And there's rumors and there's skeletons dug up all the time all over North America of giants. And many of these giants had 6 fingers and 6 toes. Now, there's been a pretty big, modern science has been trying to cover them up, and usually if someone dug up a giant, the Smithsonian showed up and said, hey, let us have those bones, and we'll put them in the museum.
And you never saw them again. Yes.
Exactly. And so you got a lot of that going on. And so, that everybody wants to know. I know L.A. Marzulli, I keep referring to him, but he's actually got a book out where he's got pictures of about a 10-footer that they forgot to hide. He actually found the pictures, and he's also got pictures of 6-fingered and 6-toed skeletons. And then M.K. Davis from Lovelock, Texas, they got to that museum before they, got rid of the skulls. And there's these huge skulls there with double rows of teeth. And, back in the 70s when they did pass the Repatriation Act, there used to be in some smaller museums throughout Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, they would have these giant skeletons. They'd have these giant Indians, 7, 8, 9 footers. And part of this, as part of this act, they had to rebury these skeletons. My humble opinion was to hide them.
Yeah.
But a lot of people want to know where the bones or of the Bigfoot are. I say, well, there's plenty. Said most of them been covered up.
Mhm.
But
well, go ahead. No, go ahead, Don.
But
I just go ahead. I do apologize.
No, it's that's part of my theory. That's the crux of my theory is, and this is just with a big paintbrush. You had the Nephilim tribes in the Promised Land. The children of Israel come in. Some of those tribes, they get out of there. They go to Europe, North America, South America, wherever. In North America, these tribes, become these. And even there's several, in my book, I reference several stories from the Comanches, the Navajo, the Cherokee. I've got everything's footnoted and everything where they tell stories of these giants. In other words, when the Indians got here, the giants were already here, and they had a civilization already established, and pretty much they began to cannibalize the Indians, and the Indians immediately went to war with them. And so you had, and then mysteriously, about the time that Jesus was, these giants began to disappear or die out for some reason. Now, there's really no explanation, what happened to them. Some of the Indians, the Indians actually say that the Great Spirit gave us power to overcome them. Some of them say they went back to the Great Spirit. Some of them say they went back through the portals. There's all kinds of interesting, kind of odd, stories about, what happened to them and where they went. So you have these, what I think is about 2,000 years ago, when whatever supernaturally occurred with these giant tribes, some of the giants fled to the wilderness and hid out in the wilderness. And part of the deal was they had to keep themselves, hidden, from from man. And they hid out, to try to keep from getting killed. And a lot of people, and as time went on, they began to genetically change to be able to, survive in the wilderness. Basically, they basically had to live in the wild, and they became what we know as Bigfoot. A lot of people say, "Oh, but where did all the hair come from?" Well, there are more than one case. There's one case in the book, where this in the 90s, this young boy, about 9 years old, in South America, his village was attacked. It was one of those deals where there was a revolution going on, and some guerrillas attacked his village, and this little boy was the only survivor, and he fled into the woods, and literally began to live with the monkey. Well, God makes us, genetically where we can adapt to our environment, and the boy started growing hair all over his body. And when he was 12 or 13 years old, they went to get him. There had been rumors that there's a human boy living with the monkey, and word got out. And so the villagers went and captured him. And sure enough, he was completely covered in hair, living with the monkeys. Of course, since he was 9 when he left, he could still speak. He still had his language, and there wasn't any problem for him to reacclimate back in. And they said when they took him in, of course, they shaved his whole body. And they said they shaved him, and when he started living back, putting clothes on, the hair naturally just grew back on his head, just on his head and his face. And there was actually a French scientist actually heard about this, went to South America, found the boy, examined him, and found the villagers. Took their story, and she says it's all legit. She said, well, that's just the way the human body is. Humans can adapt to their environment, so it's not something that's real far-fetched for once these giants get in the wilderness and they're having to live a subsistence lifestyle, away from civilization, that they naturally would begin to grow hair and become hairier, and to deal with the environment. And of course, not all Bigfoot are totally covered in hair. If I've heard more than one say, well, it was real thick on his shoulders and back, but the chest hair was thinner. You could actually see through. You could see the muscles ripped. So, they're all not just some are extremely hairy, some aren't. They're very genetically diverse, just like we are.
And speaking of genetically diverse, last week you were talking about when on the genome study that they came back that the father was an unknown and that the mother was human on the Sasquatch DNA. So even though this has been generations and generations and generations, we're talking about the origin of Sasquatch, the very first father and very first mother. The father was unknown and the mother was human. Is that what am I understanding that? Okay. So what happens after you have all these generations? Surely the DNA changes, doesn't it? Doesn't it become more human or?
Well, it changes some, but, I know that I would say I know in East Tennessee with some of the ones I've seen, some of them are, extremely human looking. I think there's been interbreeding, off and on, for a couple thousand years. And so, some of them may be more human-like than others. And they take on those, genetic traits.
And there's always been these stories about, Native American women being abducted, runaway slaves, which could, I've always believed there might be some truth to that. And so they were, so basically, Sasquatch is able to mate with human women? That it's genetically possible?
That's I believe that's so.
Okay.
As odd as it sounds, I think it's viable. Yes.
Okay, Go ahead.
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence for it, for sure. There's the Cherokee have a story, about a woman that took a Bigfoot husband, and then there's other stories, in different Indian cultures of squaws being taken as wives for Bigfoot and produced, And there's the most famous one, which is the Russian, Russian female Bigfoot. And she had children, and I think they're still trying to track those down. But
Okay. My next question is if you believe in this theory of that Bigfoot or Nephilim, do you think they're evil?
I wasn't going to say they're all evil, but I think they're inherently so, because if you believe like I believe, I don't think their souls are protected, so to speak, because they're not human, and so they can fall under the influence of fallen angels and demons. So, and if they don't have a human conscience, then and there's nowhere for them to go, so to speak. They're kind of cursed.
So you don't think they have a soul either?
I don't think they have a human soul. No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't say they didn't have a soul. I just and it has to get kind of deep into Bible stuff. But if you look in the book of Enoch will just kind of tell you where demons came from, and basically God said that when he had the Nephilim and the first generation of Nephilim, God put a curse on them and forced them to fight each other and kill each other. That was your battle of the Titans. Well, if you've got a creature that it does have a soul, but it's not a God-created soul, they can't go to heaven, they can't go to hell. God cursed those souls to roam the earth as demons, as disembodied spirits. That's unfortunately, that's their curse. So that's where the demons come from. Then you have fallen angels and demons are two separate things. Fallen angels are actually angels that have fallen. They don't, they have a body and have the ability to manipulate. Demons are wandering around. They're basically a soulless or a bodiless existence, seeking something to inhabit. And
so where did they come from?
Where? The demons?
Yes.
The demons are the dead Nephilim. In other words, when you kill a Nephilim, his soul or spirit can't go anywhere. Can't go to heaven, can't go to hell. In Enoch, I got it in my book. I can read it if I can find it here. Everything. I don't have everything just right at my fingertips. But
I hate that. I put you to the fire like this. I'm just.
Really... that's okay. But basically, when so you have these spirits, basically let loose on the earth. That's where your quote demons come from. They're dead Nephilim.
Wow.
That's what and that's in. That's in Jasher and both Enoch. And a lot of people say, well, that's not Scripture. I will say this. I don't believe it's Scripture either, but it's biblically endorsed. In other words, Jesus, talked about Enoch and Jasher. Enoch there's actually a full chapter. Enoch is plucked out of Enoch and stuck in the Bible. So, if my thing is, it's definitely, in my opinion, biblically endorsed. It may not be Scripture, so to speak, but it's something that in my opinion, if it's going to be mentioned by Jesus and it's going to be quoted by the Bible, it's something you probably ought to take, at least look at. And I kind of compare it. I look at Enoch and I look at Scripture, and if it lines up and it doesn't, contradict, I take it for what it's worth. If it's something that contradicts, then I just throw it out.
Right. Well, we know that Sasquatch are extremely intelligent. Do you think they possess any other kind of power?
Well, and I make that case in my book. It's part of, basically my book, as I go through the different, as my research matured, I go through my discoveries of, like at the very first thing is I figured out they were more than smart apes, and that was because they were exhibiting traits that were of higher intelligence. They then I discovered they had a language. And then I discovered they knew multiple languages. And then I discovered they had an awareness of technology, what it was used for. So, so that, okay, so now we're a little bit, getting a little bit deeper. Then they began to visit my home. And that quite happens to a lot of people. There's a rule, an unspoken rule of those that go out and research Bigfoot. Eventually, if you do it long enough, they're going to show up at your house.
That is the truth.
And I don't care if you live in the city. I don't care if you live in a rural farm. They will show up, okay? And a lot of people were saying, well, how did they, the ones that showed up to my house were coming over 30 miles and leaving footprints in the backyard. I got hair samples here. They were taking dog food. They were leaving handprints on the side of the house. And I live in a small city. Of course, now it's not, you could throw a stone to a woodlot, but still, it's a city. And there was actually a period of time in 2011 where a young Bigfoot, probably one about a little over 6 foot tall, got caught by my neighbors. I mean, there were 2 incidences in the spring and summer of 2011. The police were called, and everybody in the neighborhood said we had this prowler, this little black kid that was about 6 foot tall that was wearing a black hoodie. So he was the first incident. I'll tell you a couple of them just to see how crazy it was. In April, my neighbors directly behind me were having a cookout. I was not home, and they had finished their cookout, and it was dark, and they were all sitting around the driveway in their chairs, and they in the back of my, they could see into my backyard, and there's a tree in the corner lot, and one of the wives says, "There's somebody in that tree," and everybody turns around, and sure enough, about 12, 14 foot up, in the crotch of the tree was that 6, that little wiry teenage black kid with the hoodie on, and so Jeff, the guy who lives behind me, he's a cop. He was at the time, I think he was still a guard down at the county lockup. So he goes in the house, gets his flashlight and his gun. He does the policeman thing. He runs up to the tree, halt, come down. And so this little kid in the hoodie jumps out of the tree, 14 feet out the tree, hits the ground running. And they all said, I talked to all of them. They told me, this is unbelievable. They couldn't believe he didn't break a leg, okay? And then they said he ran like you wouldn't believe. And then, so later that year in August, I had actually gone to the store, and I come back, and I say it's a Saturday night, it's probably about 9:30, and the police car's in my driveway. And so I pull in, and I get out, and the policeman, comes up, and he says, "We're investigating a prowler." And I said, "At my house?" He said, "No." He said he was at your neighbor's house just to hear about 10, 15 minutes ago, but he ran, through your yard, and so we come over here looking around here to make sure he wasn't hiding over here. And so the next, big to-do, they couldn't find anybody. The next morning, I go and talk to my neighbor, and I asked her what happened. She said, about 9:15, she said it just got, it was, that time of year, 9:15, it's dusky dark, it's getting dark. She said her dogs just go crazy, start barking. And so she comes out, and it's a 2-story house, and she has a pool in her backyard, and she has a screened-in deck off the back. So she walks out, and she said the dogs were going crazy. And she said, so I flip on my outside lights, and when I do, I see this, and she used the word thing. She said, I see this thing crouched there on the left side of the house. And she said, and it looks at me, and I look back at it, and it takes off running. She says, that thing, it ran around my pool, and it jumped the fence, 4-foot fence, she said, just like a hurdler would, and then ran right by your house and right out the driveway and down the street it went. Like I never seen anything move so fast. And I said, it? You called it an it. And she looked at me real confused. She said, oh, that little prowler boy, that little boy, that black hoodie. And so then she commenced to tell me that, and no one had told me, but the neighbors behind me, there had been a prowler in the neighborhood all spring and summer long. There's a little 16-year-old girl that lives up 3 houses up the street, and she happens to have a tree outside her bedroom window, and on multiple occasions the police were called for this little black boy in a hoodie looking in at her as she's changing her clothes. And, of course, I wasn't going to say anything about that because I didn't want, no little bit of me. But so for that one summer, that little Bigfoot was just, wreaking havoc in the neighborhood. But, after that, they must have smacked him up. They must have calmed him down. But tell those stories to say that they start showing up at people's homes, and no one has any explanation of how they find you, how they get there. I'm not buying. They can smell me. Okay, I'm 30 miles away. I'm 45 miles away. They're not smelling.
Right.
And so, and some of the stuff they do is, borders. That's where it starts to border on the supernatural, because start finding, like I would find one night dogs went crazy, went out back, fresh in the dirt with a 18-inch footprint, perfect footprint, beautiful footprint, one of them. Not one, not two, not three, not four, just one, just like a signature, we were here. But no other footprint. How it got in and got out without leaving any others, I don't have a clue. So, yeah. So
I've heard that story before, like tracks just ending in the middle of a field. And I just want to say something very quickly.
Sure.
We have a caller, area code. Oh, he fell off. But if you're listening, 952, if you have a question, you'll need to press 1. The number to call in is 347-989-0313. And if you have a question for our guest, please press 1 so we'll know you're not just listening in. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. And then, so after the home visitations, then, of course, we have the Sasquatch Genome Study. And that's another piece to the puzzle, so to speak. So now we have genetic evidence that we have a human hybrid. We have a unknown male progenitor and a human female. And then, then I start, then I start gathering evidence, and I start seeing things. Like I start getting, like I actually saw with my own eyes, but I actually have a video where one of these Bigfooter and what everybody wants to call stealth mode. In other words, it's kind of like the Predator movie. He's kind of transparent, but in the video I have, he actually moves a tree. There's no wind blowing or anything else, and he pushes a tree as he's following it. And then he stops and stands behind me, and you can see. Because I think I can see. A lot of people are like, oh, it's just leaves and shadows, but I think it's a pretty good outline of the creature there. And then,
but it's blurry looking behind there.
Yeah,
where
it's
he's
blurry.
Standing, it's blurry.
There's actually distortion.
I just want to tell you that we've encountered that too. There was an area where it was just one spot. We were taking pictures of something else. But this one spot, no matter what angle we were at, this one spot was distorted. Now, I could see one picture being distorted, or even the camera having a smudge on it or something like that, because we tried to figure out how but we were taking a picture of the formation. So we were taking it from different angles, and yet the same area was in a different spot in the picture and in a different spot in the frame, but yet it was always distorted. Mm-hmm. And I know from my ghost hunting days now that sometimes an energy, when it's trying to appear, will distort. It's almost like a heat wave. Have you ever seen like a heat wave come up off the road? Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like when the energy or when a spirit is trying to manifest. And I've seen this numerous times. And but I never put together that it was a Sasquatch. I always thought it was a spirit trying to manifest. But, I mean, anyway, back to you.
Well, that's okay. Another thing that another part, one of the things that kind of, was part, this is all the sum of evidence. My worldview as a Christian with the evidence, and the two things were, collided. Starting, are getting ready to overlap and slide. I was one of the things that happened to me, and it was kind of about this time I was starting to, I had already was serious, I already knew they were human hybrid, but still a lot of people, they're this smart age, blah blah blah. They don't know what you're talking about, yada yada yada. So I did an experiment with a friend. I had Fred Maddox with me, and we went up into the mountains, and we'd gone to one of my areas. We'd been there all day, and really nothing had happened, maybe a couple of whoops. And we were walking on our way out, and I said, I'm going to try an experiment. He said, what do you mean? And I said, I'm going to start talking out loud, and I'm going to badmouth the Bigfoot. I'm going to, talk them down. I'm going to say some pretty nasty, rotten things. And I'm going to see if I can elicit a response, okay? So as we're walking back out the trail, back down to the parking lot, by the time you get down the mountain, it opens back up. It's an old roadbed in the Smokies. And so we're walking out, and I'm saying, they're just, they're X, Y, and Z, and they're blankety blanks. And, they're just a bunch of show-offs and a bunch of, so forth and so on. So I can't repeat it. I was pretty much being extremely negative about them, and basically called them out and called them a bunch of, what's the word I'm looking for? Called them cowards, and they were too afraid to show themselves, and they couldn't do all these things that they could do. Well, as we're walking, I'm Greg's on my left. To my right is a creek. Across the creek is a slope that goes up, and it's covered in laurel, and it goes up probably about 100 feet. And on our left is a small rock wall, and it's pretty straight up. So it's a narrow little holler, so to speak. And as I'm doing all this bad mouthing, now I've got my camera running, and he's got a digital voice recorder turned on. He's got in his pocket. Well, I get hit on my right side, and it feels like if you've ever grabbed an electric fence when you're a child, which I did, it felt like I'd grabbed an electric fence, and a shock went through my right arm, across my chest, and out my left arm. And it hit me so hard that I stumbled and almost went down. And at the same time, I stumbled. I stumbled, and I stopped, and I said, "Greg, did you feel that?" He said, "No, but I heard a whoosh go by my face, like there was a wind blowing, but there wasn't any wind blowing." And so, after I kind of gathered my composure, because my heart was beating 90 miles an hour. I mean, it was a shock. I mean, it's just like you put a taser on me and popped me good. So it took me a few minutes to get my bearings back, and we looked around, filmed, we couldn't see anything, couldn't find anything. So we go ahead and leave. The next morning when I woke up, first thing you got to do is you have to go to the bathroom. Well, when I went to the bathroom, there was blood in my urine. And so I called Greg later that day, and I said, "Well, did you get anything?" He said, "Well, I got some really interesting stuff on the digital voice recorder." And so he sent me a copy of the tape. But I said, "Did you?" And I just flat out asked him. I said, "Look, some really weird stuff went on." I said, "I had blood in my urine." He said, "Well, I hate to admit it, but I had blood in my urine as well." So whatever hit us caused, enough damage to cause us both to have blood in our urine. Now, thank goodness it cleared up. The next time I urinated, everything was fine. But for that first time, there was no doubt it was blood. It wasn't a little bit. It was quite a bit. So, and so when we played the digital voice recorder back, at the exact time, you can hear us talking. At the exact time I get hit, his recorder picks up. It's like a pop and then a crackle. So you hear a loud pop, and then there's a crackle afterwards when we get, quote, zapped. And I know you know what zapping is.
Mm-hmm.
So basically this for me kind of blew it wide open. At this point I was like, I'm done with the dumb ape stuff. I'm done with the whoops and the hoops and hollers and, you know, we're running around naked in the woods. And I thought, nope, y'all done smoked that. I said, you knew what I was saying in English. You understood it, you got mad, and you reacted. That's will, that's intellect, and that's emotion. I said, it's all off the table now. And pretty much after that, that's how I looked at him. I'm like, you're just a big, hairy, human hybrid human being. It's probably a lot smarter than I am. And so I don't, you know, I ain't, the next time I went to the woods and they started all that stomping and that whooping stuff, I just turned to the woods and I said, hey, it ain't working, boys. I said, you can say that for the Finding Bigfoot folks. I said, I ain't believe it. And as soon as I said that, the woods went silent. They knew the gig was up. I'm not, you know, I wasn't buying it. And if y'all want to interact with me, it'll be some other way. So after that, you know, I pretty much just kind of threw all that out. Another thing that kind of clued me in that something a little bit more maybe supernatural was going on was their ability to locate technology. And I don't care how well you hit it, what you put on it, what you didn't put on it, and what you hit it inside. The minute you put any piece of technology in the woods, they immediately knew where it was, and they immediately knew what it was. And you can ask the people from the Olympic Project. You know, they tried everything. I had cameras out. Pretty much what I found out with them is you put a camera up, they'd be curious about it. You might get, you know, I got, you know, some, you know, a little bit of footage. But then after they kind of were curious about it, you know, we're not really interested in it, they'd either disable it or they knew if they stood right in front of it, it would light out. And so they put something in front of it to do what they wanted to do, and they pull it away. I've had to do all kinds of, I had one of them lick the camera, which everybody says, well, that's crazy. Well, probably that's the whole point. They were just because they were just doing something stupid because they could. In the Olympic Project, they were licking their cameras as well. That's over in the Olympic Peninsula. So, you know, it wasn't, you know, everybody says, well, that's weird. That Bigfoot wouldn't lick a camera. I said, oh, yeah, they would. I had, interestingly, I tried, there was a period where I knew a place where they were going through, and I tried to put up basically a camera trap. In other words, a camera wasn't a camera, wasn't a camera, wasn't a camera. And boy, I thought I had them. And, of course, they knew what they were, and they just would come up underneath them, and they'd run them down the trees, and they'd cover them with stuff, and they knew they just had to disable one, so they'd always just disable one and walk through it. And so, you know, it came pretty evident that they knew what cameras were, what they were for, what they were doing. And so, you know, cameras pretty much became useless. And that's, in my humble opinion, that's why you don't have any on game cameras.
That's right.
So now you have all this kind of, you know, begins to stack up, you know, for me. And so then I start, you know, getting into the research of, okay, what do we know can do all these things? You know, of course, a lot of people say, well, that's just, you know, they're special, you know. I understand they're special. But at some point, there are some of these things, and then when you start getting stories, you know, well, we followed it into a box canyon and it disappeared, or we went out into the middle of a snow-covered field, and in the center of the field, you know, 300 yards away from anything, the tracks just vanished. You know, and then you start having the people saying, well, you know, I was out in the woods, and this is really strange, Scott, but this portal opened up, and this Bigfoot walked through, and then the portal shut. And don't tell nobody, because everybody will think I'm crazy. So, you know, when you start hearing that sort of stuff, you're like, okay, now we've got And that's when I started doing the research and kind of putting it all together. And that's kind of why I came to the conclusion that they were, in my theory, they were most likely Nephilim. Because they retain, if you start looking at angelic abilities and what some of the things a Bigfoot could do, there's some of them, some of them cross over. When Paul was taken from the prison, an angel, they walked right through the prison, the first and the second ward, and nobody saw them. They were invisible, cloaked.
Right.
When angels appear in front of men, sometimes they make them tremble, and they pass out, or they get so afraid they can't do anything. Well, that's one of the things everybody talks about. Some of the Bigfoot can do. It's happened to me. Some people think of infrasound, but they can cast. You get this feeling of dread, and you start to have, your eyes start watering, your heart starts racing. You feel like something's sneaking up on you. And
you feel chest pressure, and I've been exposed to that.
Yeah, so that all that combined and kind of crescendoed, and then I started researching it because I'm like, okay, there's got to be an explanation. And
did you ever think about hypnotism or remote viewing, or I think maybe they are extremely so intelligent that they have the ability to remote influence. Do you know anything about remote influence? It's where you can basically hypnotize someone into believing you don't see me.
Oh, no, I believe they have that ability, yeah. I mean, they do the mind speak for sure. I don't allow them to do it. I refuse to allow it. But I know
don't you have to have some sort of psychic ability to pick up mind speak, though?
I don't know. I mean, some people, they just kind of shove it in there whether you want it or not. And I know that I think even Les Stroud admitted that he was mind spoke when he came here. So first time it ever happened to him. So there's I don't know. I've probably got a dozen stories. The mind speak. There's a couple people that they're habituators that regularly, say, are mind speaking with the Bigfoot on their property. And an interesting thing I found is when I got into, could they be Nephilim? Is I started, when people would call, my habituators would call and talk to me and say, ask them questions for me. And I said, okay. I said, ask them if they know who Jesus is. Ask them where they come from. Ask them specifically, say the words, are you Nephilim? Right? Everyone that asked, number one, who Jesus was very interesting. They denied Jesus. Every one of them said, don't know who he is. But they all said that they were our brothers or that God created. But they don't know who Jesus is. I thought that was very interesting. When they were asked if they were Nephilim, all of them got angry or refused to answer the question. That was very telling to me, that they wouldn't answer that question. And, of course, when I said who, and who are you, you got all kinds of answers. You had some of them saying, we're your brothers. God created us all. Some of them said, we're your space brothers. We were brought here, by the greats. And then some of them would say, we're the sons of Seth. And so, I used to get all kinds of answers, and I kept saying, no, hang on. They're all Bigfoot, so to speak. They're all supposed to be, how am I getting, so somebody's not telling the truth here. And so I don't, I've never gotten a straight answer from any of these people that have mind spoke and asked the direct questions. I've never got a straight answer on anything. Hence, I don't trust them because they have a hard time telling the same story. And so
we had some researchers that let me tell you this story. These researchers were out of a Texas organization, and they were investigating an area up near Pat Mazie Lake. And, of course, there was a lot of video coming out of that area and everything, and there were a lot of rumors of this and that and all, but what it all ended up being is that these diehard researchers, they were scientific. but they came away, I think at least 2 of them, they said they were never going to research Bigfoot again because they were evil. They were evil demons. And they truly believed that. And they were not going to research them anymore. Now, these were just regular people. You know, I'm sure they were Christian-based. But for them to turn around and say that, and at this time that they were saying it, this was, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, before the woo-woo movement, you know? And for them to say that, it was like, I just like, where in the world did that come from? I mean, they're not evil, but you know, do you think they're dangerous?
I personally believe that they're all potentially dangerous. And
I mean, we're talking about. I'm talking about all different kinds of dangerous. Okay, you have mental dangerous, emotional dangerous, and physically dangerous.
I think for sure they're all physically dangerous. Here's the problem. I don't trust them, and they have the strength and abilities that we don't understand and can't stop. So the only thing that's stopping them from doing whatever they want to us is a set of unspoken rules that we all know they have. And in my book, I try to kind of, through the process of my experience, kind of come up with some of these rules. Now, I don't know all the rules, and there are exceptions to the rules, but you know as well as they seem to have these rules. Like they won't show themselves to a human male, but they will show themselves to a female or children. They don't want to get their picture made. They don't want to leave covert communications or covert evidence, but they can gift exchange with you as long as they don't do it in such a way that's covert enough for people to say, oh, a Bigfoot must have done that. They'll do it in some covert way. So they have all these rules. So, but go back to your question of, I believe that they are all potentially dangerous. Now, I know some of them have saved humans' lives, and that's great. And some people, you know, there's Mary Green, you know, with the Janice Carter story. That's just right down the road. I have the book. I know Mary, knew Mary Green pretty well. We got to be pretty good friends there before she passed. And so, I'm 100% on board that was a true story. And that her grandfather befriended a Bigfoot, and they had a relationship, and they loved each other. They actually told each other, I love you. I don't doubt that, right? But as a general rule, the one that you're meeting in the woods, you don't have a clue. You don't know if that's a good one or a bad one. You don't know if, the rules aren't fine today, I can tear your head off. You know what I'm saying? I forgot how much time I got. I got some stories. I'll drop a couple stories that I have.
Well, hold on just one moment. Sure. We do have a caller with a question, so let me make sure. They've got a question mark there. 918, do you have a question?
Yes, I had a question about footprints disappearing because I had a coincidence a couple of winters ago. I was walking, checking traps in my pasture, and we seen prints, big prints, and we followed them, and they stepped over about a 5-foot barbed wire fence, and then we lost them. I mean, it was in fresh snow, too, and all of a sudden the prints just stopped after it stepped over, and they were just completely gone. We couldn't find them anymore. So I was just curious about him talking about prints just disappearing all of a sudden and how that happened.
About that?
Well, yeah, wow. I got that. I've heard similar stories. One story was, like I told you before, the prints were in the center of a field, a big hay field, in the wintertime, and they just stopped with no explanation. And you know that's.
And then all of a sudden they just stopped. Once I went over the fence, and I'm just like, wow, what happened? And we didn't know.
I mean, were there any trees or any woods? Could he have
we were walking through the woods, and then it came to a clearing on the back side of my property, and you could see 1 foot over, and then the 1 foot over, one other footprint, then it was gone.
Yeah.
And the snow was about 3 inches deep. I mean, it was fresh snow. And so,
that, you know, and there's a lot of speculation. There's some people that believe that there's portals that they can open and go through. Okay, that's on the woo side of it. There's other people that think they could jump quite far. There's other people that think, there's some sort of logical explanation. Like I said, that's where I started coming down on the supernatural side, because there's too many of these reports where this sort of thing was happening for me just to discount it. You know what I'm saying? Just like your story. What do you do with that? Where did they go? What logical explanation could there be? So,
do you have any more questions? Do you have any more questions, 918?
One other question. You're saying aggressive, and now I get to thinking, I walk down some of my land with a rifle with me. Are they going to notice that and be aggressive towards me? If
I don't think so. I recommend that anybody that goes out in the woods goes armed. And I just think that's smart. And and number two, you don't go alone.
No.
But no, I don't think it'll be, in my personal opinion, I don't think you're going wrong by carrying around.
Well, right after this, I started smelling this smell, and then I walked another 50 yards. I didn't smell it, and then another 20 yards, and I smelled it again. And then again, I smelled it. It would just come and go, like something was
sounds
following.
Like he was being followed, I would think.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. So
thank you so much for. Oh, thank you so much for calling in, 918.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else that you want to share before we get back to?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, and call back again. We know you listen, so it was real good of you to finally speak up. It's good to hear from you. Okay. Scott, you were going to, before you share those couple of stories, and we are getting short on time, 10 minutes, so, but I think this is Jeff. Jeff, are you with us?
Finally.
Well, welcome. Better late than never.
I guess so.
Scott was fixing to share some pretty good stories, so go ahead, Scott.
Okay. A couple quick stories from the book about the not-so-good side of Bigfoot.
Okay.
In our research with North American Bigfoot Search, we get contacted sometimes by people that just want tell us things or give us information. And on more than one occasion, we were contacted by family members of Green Berets. Now, the Green Berets themselves were sworn to secrecy, and it's interesting that both of these two different families, the children, after they passed away, relayed these stories. You have they're in two different locations of the United States in two different time periods. But basically, it's one of those deathbed things where, they tell their children, because they're not going to break their oath, but they'll tell their children, and they feel like this information that should get out. And so people are always, sending in, their Bigfoot stories, and these are a couple that came in. But basically, what goes on, apparently, from time to time, there are clans of Bigfoot that go rogue, and they become cannibalistic, and they start killing and eating people. And the feds know about it, and this is just a scenario. I got to keep everything very general to protect everybody here, but in general, let's say there's a small town, rural town, and all of a sudden people start going missing. And then the sheriff department and start looking, and all of a sudden, they get the dogs out and they go start looking in the rural areas where all these people are going missing at, and then they find a situation where sometimes they'll find just an area where there's human remains, and it's obvious these remains have been eaten. So lots of times the bones are actually cracked open, marrow gotten out, etc. Most of the time these bones there's just small pieces left, but it's obviously human remains. So, of course, the local sheriffs freak out. So they call in the FBI. So the FBI shows up. Well, once the FBI gets there, they start looking around, and when they start digging into it, they realize the Bigfoot are doing this. So they have a protocol. They reach out to the military. The military sends in a Green Beret crew. They have all the technology. They have the infrared, etc. They have what they need. They go into the area, track down the clan, kill all the members of the clan, get them out, sanitize them. Any human remains, they sanitize. The cover story is, we have some sort of devil worshiping cult killing people up here in Podunk Hollow. And so, you got that off of, well, Scott, that's a fantastic story, but we heard it from two different family members from two different deceased Green Berets, two different locations in the United States.
Wow.
So something's going on. Okay, and so
right.
the other story, I guess I'll tell you the one about the lady up in Michigan. I get a phone call, or a phone call gets relayed to me. A lady wants to talk to somebody about Bigfoot. David disseminates them out and says, I've got a witness who'd like to speak to someone. You want to call her? I said, sure, I'll call. I call her. She needs a phone number. And it's a woman, and she says, we're so excited. We just moved into a new house up here. We've got about 50, 60 acres. It's beautiful farmland. And me and my mother and my son. She's recently divorced. And she said, just recently, it was this was like early, I think right after the first of the early spring. And said she looked outside, and her mother was on the back porch waving something across, just waving like at the open field, And so she stepped out and she says, Mom, what are you doing? She says, I'm waving at that big man over there in the edge of the woods. And she said, I look across and there's this huge, 10, 12-foot black something. She said it was too far away, other than it was large and black. And as they wave, it literally raises its hand and waves back. And she said, could that have been a Bigfoot? And I said, well, it's very possible. And I said, just be careful, She says, there's, it's a big open field, full of sod. It's been plowed. There's nothing in it. I don't feel too bad, So, I tell her, just be careful, I said, is there any men in the house? She said, no, it's just me, my younger son, and my mother. I said, just be on the watch out, be careful. I said, at that time, hadn't had too many bad stories, so I just told her to be careful. Probably, it would have been July, August. The corn was up about 6 feet tall. I get a call. She calls me this time. She says, I just needed to tell you, I'm so excited. And I said, what was going on? She says, I leased out the field behind the house, and a local farmer, he planted corn. And, we have our backyard, and they got they had a covered back porch, and it was one of those back, this long back porch along the whole house, And she said, we love sitting out there, and now that the corn's up, we'll see the red eyes glowing. And we can see the dark outlines of them. They're coming up. And, about once or twice a week we go out there and watch them. And they'll come right to the edge of the backyard and just sit there and look at it. And at that point, that got me a little worried. I said, well, just be careful, please. I said, don't know, that could get dangerous. She said, oh, I said, well, just be careful. I said, don't give them any invitations or anything. So fast forward to probably the corn hadn't been harvested yet, so I guess it's probably late August, early September. And I about 10 o'clock at night, I get an extremely panicked phone call. She's hysterical. And I said, calmed her down. I said, what's going on? She says, it's awful. I said, what's it? She said, well, I was inside, I'm washing the dishes. I'm looking out. I'm sitting there washing the dishes, and I start hearing my wind chime start this tingling constantly. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. Of course, the wind's not blowing that much, and I'm like, what in the world, And so I flip on my little back porch light, and it's just a single little light, she said, And she said, I step out, and she said she still had the dish rag and a dried rag in her hand. And she said, when I stepped out, I looked to the left, and on the edge of the house, the corner where she had the wind chime, she said was a large Bigfoot, about 10 foot tall. He was all gray. But he was staring like towards the front of the house, and he had in his right hand he had the wind chime, and he was just constantly tingling. And she said about the time she's, oh my God, of time movement from her right side catches her attention, and she looks back to the right, and just coming around the other side of the house and walking right off the steps. In other words, the steps were 3 steps down. Slowly walking very deliberately, not looking at her, looking straight ahead. She said was a smaller Bigfoot, black. She said, in her opinion, obviously younger. And she said he was slowly parading himself. She said, well, when he got a little bit closer to me, she said it was obvious he was aroused in a major way. And said he paraded himself in front of me very slowly, went all the way across in front of me, went around the behind, went around the gray one, and as soon as he stepped around and went towards the front of the house, the gray one slowly put his arm down, stopped tingling, and walked off. And she was losing her mind. Of course, and she said, well, what do I do? What do I do? Of course, I told her, well, you've always found this. I said, well, number one, I said, do you have motion sensor lights? And she said, no. I said, go to the store tomorrow and buy some. I said, do you have any frame cameras? She said, no. I said, go to Walmart, go to some store. I said, is it cheap? It doesn't matter as long as they have a infrared sensor. And I said, put those up on the back of your house. And I said, is the corn still out there? And she said, yes. I said, if he'll cut the corn, have him cut the corn as soon as he'll cut it. And she said, I talked to her for about 30 minutes. I said, we found that usually these things work to keep them away from your house. They don't like the motion sensors, and they don't like the cameras. And I said, if you'll literally put them on the house and facing outward. And so I never did hear back from her. I told her to call me back if this doesn't work. Do you have any problems? So, those reports, also influenced my thinking quite a bit. And this is not the only woman that's had this type. I've got another story in my book about a girl from your section of the world in Oklahoma that had something similar to this happen to her more than once. And so, so there, you have to be careful. That's why when you ask me, are they dangerous? See what I'm saying? I'm gonna err on the side of caution. Whenever I have a woman call me up and say, I want to get into Bigfoot, and where can I see a Bigfoot? I strongly discourage, especially a woman alone. And if you want to call me a sexist, you just go right ahead. I'd prefer to be a sexist and not encourage someone to go out and have something bad happen to them.
Exactly.
Because, it's like we talked about earlier as part of the rules. It seems like, I know that one of the statistics Dave found out when he was researching for his book, 92% of all sightings, full-body daylight sightings, are had by women, by themselves.
Yep.
And of that 92%, about 90% of those women are on their menstrual cycle if they're of age. So those are startling statistics that a lot of people won't tell people. So
Oh my gosh.
I'll leave you with that.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad I'm past age. Maybe they wouldn't be interested in me. But, Scott, I tell you what, it has been great having you on the show. How do the show actually, we're streaming right now, so I want you to tell everyone how they can go about getting your book, the Nephilim Among Us.
They can go to, I've got a blog set up for it. It's called the Nephilim Among Us .blogspot.com at TheNephilimAmongus.blogspot.com, where they can go to the Bigfoot Field Journal. You can Google Bigfoot Field Journal, and I've got a link there. That's my Bigfoot blog.
Okay.
And so either one of those will, then they can get to my link where I sell the book. And it's full of the ebook is full of pictures. You have to kind of pare down your written book because I use CreateSpace to self-publish, and the more pictures, the more they charge. So,
I see.
Yeah, so nobody wants a book that's $50. But I prefer, I would prefer. There's a lot of people that want the paperback, but you have to take a lot out as far as the pictures. But the ebook is just loaded full of pictures and my research and everything that we discussed. Of course, it's in a lot more detail, and I have a lot of the documentation, quotes from the Bible and Enoch, and the stories of from the Indians, and like I said, it's all documented. You can click the links and look it up yourself. As several wise people have said, don't believe me. Don't believe what I'm telling you. Go research it for yourself. Exactly. And I encourage people to do that. Don't believe me. Don't believe a word I've said. Go look these things up yourself. Go do the research. Prove me wrong or prove me right. But I think that's how people learn. I think that's the best way to do it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a remarkable interview, and we really enjoyed it. And keep in touch. So, and we'd like to have you back again in the future.
That'd be great.
We don't have very many episodes left this season, but we may have you back next season and see where you're at on this.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I guess we're going to go ahead and call it a night. We'll be back next Monday night at 8:30 on Night Callers Bigfoot Radio. Good night, everyone, and see you then.
Good night.
There she is. Good night.